The gunshot cracked through the crisp morning air as Marlene Sinclair hit her target dead center, an empty whiskey bottle perched on a fence post 100 yards away. Her auburn hair, wild and untamed in the morning breeze, caught the golden rays of the rising Colorado sun. It was 1875 in Durango, Colorado, and at 22 years old, Marlene had already earned a reputation that traveled faster than the newly laid railroad tracks connecting the frontier towns of the West. "That's my girl. Another perfect shot," hollered her father, Thomas Sinclair, a weathered silver miner whose dreams of striking it rich had brought them to this rugged mountain town 3 years prior. Marlene lowered her Winchester rifle, the metal still warm against her calloused hands. "Pa, it ain't much of a challenge anymore. I could hit that in my sleep. Then maybe you ought to enter that shooting contest next week. Prize money's $50. Could help us through winter." Marlene nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Money was tight since her father's accident in the mine had left him with a permanent limp and lungs that rattled like loose coins in a jar when he coughed. "I'll think about it," she said, though they both knew she'd already made up her mind. As they walked back to their modest cabin on the outskirts of town, Marlene's thoughts drifted to the whispers that followed her through Durango. The local women viewed her with a mixture of disdain and pity, a girl who could outshoot most men, who wore trousers beneath her skirts when riding, who refused 3 marriage proposals before her 20th birthday, and who worked alongside men at the general store rather than seeking a husband to support her. "Wild as a Mustang," they'd say. "That poor Sinclair girl will never settle down." Perhaps they were right. But Marlene had watched too many women wither away in loveless marriages, beaten down by hardship and disappointment. She'd promised herself a different fate. The general store was already bustling when Marlene arrived for her shift. Mr. Jenkins, the portly store owner, greeted her with a nod. "Morning, Marlene. Need you to take inventory of the new shipment that came in on yesterday's train. And Mrs. Peterson mentioned she'll be by for that special order of fabric." "I'll handle it," Marlene said, tying an apron around her waist. She was halfway through counting sacks of flour when the bell above the door jingled. A tall figure blocked the morning light, casting a long shadow across the wooden floorboards. "Good morning," called a deep voice that Marlene didn't recognize. She turned to see a man she'd never encountered before. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a lean frame. His clothes were trail-worn but clean dark trousers, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms, and a dusty brown hat that he promptly removed upon entering the store. "Can I help you?" Marlene asked, straightening her posture. "I hope so," he replied with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Name's Owen Ellis. Just rode into town yesterday, looking to stock up before heading to my uncle's ranch about 20 miles north." Marlene nodded, trying not to stare at his face, handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard, straight nose, and eyes the color of a summer sky. "What supplies do you need, Mr. Ellis?" "Owen, please," he corrected, setting his hat on the counter. "Coffee, salt, sugar, ammunition for a Colt .45, some jerky if you've got it, and whatever fresh food might last a few days on horseback." As Marlene gathered the items, she felt his eyes following her movements. "You handle that Winchester like you know how to use it," he commented, nodding toward the rifle she'd propped behind the counter upon arrival. She paused. "I do. Better than most." A smile played at the corner of his mouth. "I don't doubt that for a second." There was something different about the way he said it, not mocking or condescending like most men, but with genuine respect. 57 cents for everything," Marlene said, tallying the items. Owen paid and gathered his supplies, but lingered at the counter. "I heard there's a shooting competition next week. You planning to enter?" "How'd you know about that already?" "You just got to town," he chuckled. "Small towns and their telegraphs have nothing on saloon gossip. I stopped in for a drink last night and heard all about it." "And what else did you hear about Durango?" Marlene asked, curiosity piqued. "That it's growing fast, that the mines are producing good silver, and that there's a red-headed woman who can outshoot most men but is too wild for any decent fellow to court." Marlene felt her cheeks flush. "People should mind their own business." "I agree," Owen said, his expression turning serious. "Though I've never put much stock in what people say about anything or anyone." Before Marlene could respond, the bell jingled again as Mrs. Peterson entered, her lips pursing at the sight of Marlene engaged in conversation with a strange man. "I should let you get back to work," Owen said, tipping his head slightly. "But I'll be in town until after that competition. Maybe I'll see you there." "Maybe," Marlene replied, watching as he placed his hat back on his head and walked out into the bright Colorado morning. That evening, as Marlene helped her father prepare a simple supper of beans and cornbread, she found herself thinking about Owen Ellis. "You're quiet tonight," Thomas observed, setting down 2 tin plates. "Something happened at the store today." "No," Marlene answered quickly. Then, "Well, I met someone. A newcomer passing through. He mentioned the shooting competition." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "A man who didn't scoff at the idea of you entering, seemed more intrigued than anything." She stirred the beans with more vigor than necessary. "Doesn't matter. He's just passing through." Her father studied her face carefully. "You know, Marlene, being independent doesn't mean you have to be alone forever." "I'm not alone. I have you." "I won't always be here," he said softly, the familiar rattle in his chest punctuating his words. "And I don't want you to end up with no one because you're afraid of taking a chance." "I'm not afraid," she protested. "I just haven't met a man who sees me as more than a curiosity or a challenge to tame." Thomas Sinclair smiled sadly. "Then maybe you haven't met the right man yet." The morning of the shooting competition dawned clear and cool. Marlene had risen before the sun, practicing with her Winchester as the first light painted the eastern sky. She wore her best skirt, dark blue wool, and a crisp white blouse, her hair braided and pinned beneath a modest hat. It was her one concession to propriety on this day when all eyes would be on her. The competition was held in a field just outside town. A crowd had gathered, mostly men with a few women standing at a distance, whispering behind their hands when Marlene approached the registration table. "You here to watch your husband compete, miss?" asked the man taking names. "I'm here to compete myself," Marlene replied evenly. "Marlene Sinclair." The man looked up, recognition dawning. "Oh, right, that'll be $2 entry fee." She handed over the coins, nearly a day's wages at the general store, and took her place among the other competitors, all men who eyed her with varying degrees of amusement and annoyance. "Looks like we got ourselves some entertainment today, boys," remarked a burly miner with a thick mustache. "Little lady thinks she can shoot." "I don't think I know," Marlene replied without looking at him. A few chuckles rippled through the group, but died when a familiar figure joined their ranks. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Madam." Owen Ellis nodded to Marlene, his blue eyes twinkling with good humor. He'd cleaned up since their meeting at the store, wearing a fresh shirt, and his hat looked brushed free of dust. "You entering too?" Marlene asked. "Thought I might. Been a while since I tested my skills against worthy opponents." Before she could respond, the organizer called for attention and explained the rules. 3 rounds, stationary targets at varying distances, moving targets pulled on a rope system, and finally, accuracy shooting at small objects. Highest total score would win the $50. The first round went quickly. Most competitors hit the stationary targets easily enough, though a few were eliminated when they missed the furthest ones. Marlene hit all hers dead center, earning grudging nods from some of the men. Owen performed equally well, his shots precise and confident. When their eyes met after the round, he gave her a small, approving nod that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. The second round proved more challenging. The moving target's tin cans swinging from ropes eliminated half the remaining competitors. When Marlene's turn came, she took a deep breath, tracked the movement, and fired in a smooth rhythm. 6 shots, 6 hits. A murmur went through the crowd. This was no fluke or lady's luck. The girl could shoot. By the final round, only 4 competitors remained: Marlene, Owen, the burly miner who'd mocked her, and the town's deputy sheriff. The targets were small glass bottles at 75 yards. The miner went first, hitting 3 of 5 bottles. The deputy managed 4. Then came Marlene's turn. She stepped to the line, aware of every eye on her. Her father stood at the edge of the crowd, pride evident on his weathered face. She raised her Winchester, sighted down the barrel, and found that familiar place of calm within herself. 5 shots, 5 shattered bottles, perfect score. A smattering of applause broke out, genuine this time, though some still muttered about beginner's luck or tricks. Owen was last. He approached the line with easy confidence, tipped his hat to Marlene, and took his stance. His first 4 shots were perfect, each bottle exploding in a shower of glass. For his 5th and final shot, he paused, glanced at Marlene, then back to the target. The shot rang out. The last bottle remained intact. Whispers erupted through the crowd as Owen lowered his rifle, a slight smile on his face as he nodded to Marlene. Had he missed on purpose? Surely a man with his skill couldn't miss such a shot after hitting the previous 4 perfectly. "Looks like we have a winner," announced the organizer. Miss Marlene Sinclair. As the $50 was pressed into her hand, Marlene searched the crowd for Owen. She found him at the edge, preparing to leave. "Mr. Ellis," she called, hurrying after him. "Wait." He turned, that same smile playing at his lips. "Congratulations, Miss Sinclair. Fine shooting." "You missed that last shot on purpose," she said, not as a question but a statement. "Did I? Maybe my hand slipped." "Your hand doesn't slip. Not after 4 perfect shots." Owen looked at her for a long moment, then shrugged. "Perhaps I just wanted to see the look on all those men's faces when they had to acknowledge that the best shot in Durango is a woman." "I don't need charity," Marlene said, feeling a flash of anger. "I can win on my own merits." "I have no doubt of that," Owen replied seriously. "But you can't deny it was satisfying to watch them eat their words." Despite herself, Marlene felt a smile tugging at her lips. "It was, at that. Let me make it up to you," he said. "Have dinner with me tomorrow evening. There must be somewhere in this town that serves a decent meal." Marlene hesitated. She rarely socialized, especially not with men who just arrived in town and would likely leave just as quickly. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Because of what people might say?" Owen asked. "The same people who said you couldn't win today." She met his gaze, seeing the challenge there, but also something else: genuine interest, perhaps even admiration. "The Mountain View Hotel has a restaurant," she said finally. 7 o'clock. Owen's smile broadened. "I'll be there." That night, Marlene showed her father the prize money. "This will get us through winter with extra to spare," she said, setting the bills on their small kitchen table. Thomas counted the money with gnarled fingers. "You did good, girl. Real good. Your mother would have been proud." Marlene touched the locket at her throat, the only thing she had left of her mother, who died of fever when Marlene was just 12. "I hope so. Now, what's this I hear about you having dinner with that Ellis fellow tomorrow?" Marlene stared at him. How did you small town? Thomas reminded her with a chuckle. Mrs. Jenkins overheard and told Mr. Jenkins, who mentioned it to Hank at the livery, who told me when I went to check on that wagon wheel he's fixing. It's just dinner, Marlene said, busying herself with the dishes. He's leaving soon anyway. Was all her father said, but his knowing smile spoke volumes. The Mountain View Hotel was the finest establishment in Durango, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards but represented the height of frontier luxury. Its restaurant served actual meals with tablecloths and proper silverware, a far cry from the beans and whiskey offered at the saloons. Marlene arrived precisely at 7, wearing her Sunday dress, a sage green cotton with a modest bustle and slightly puffed sleeves. She'd spent an hour taming her hair into a proper updo, securing it with pins that already threatened to surrender to her unruly curls. Owen was waiting in the small lobby, looking remarkably different in a clean black suit and string tie. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline and the kind of clean-cut good looks that made several female diners glance appreciatively in his direction. "Miss Sinclair," he greeted her, taking her hand briefly. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling awkward and out of place. This was why she avoided such social situations. She never knew quite how to behave or what to say. Once seated at a corner table, Owen ordered them both the special roast beef with potatoes and a bottle of wine. "I don't normally drink wine," Marlene admitted when the waiter left. "Neither do I," Owen confessed with a grin. "Seemed like the proper thing to do, though. We can switch to whiskey if you prefer." Marlene laughed, feeling some of her tension ease. "Wine is fine. Special occasion and all, indeed. It's not every day I get to dine with the best shot in Colorado territory." "You're teasing me." "Not at all. I meant what I said yesterday. Your skill is impressive." Marlene studied him. "Where did you learn to shoot like that? You're nearly as good as I am." "My father taught me. He was a lawman back in Texas before he died. Said a man should know how to protect himself and others." "I'm sorry about your father," Marlene said softly. Owen nodded his thanks. "It was some years ago now. I was 18 when it happened, ambushed during a prisoner transfer. After that, I drifted for a while. Did some ranch work, tried my hand at prospecting, even rode with a cattle drive up to Montana. And now you're heading to your uncle's ranch." "That's right. My uncle Jim Ellis has a spread north of here, getting on in years with no children of his own. Wrote me a letter saying if I wanted to learn the ranching business proper, he'd teach me." "Sounds like a good opportunity," Marlene said, genuinely impressed. Most men she knew were content to chase get-rich-quick schemes in the mines or gambling halls. "I hope so. I've spent enough years drifting. Time to put down some roots." Their food arrived, and the conversation flowed easily as they ate. Owen asked about her life in Durango, listened attentively as she spoke of moving west with her father after her mother's death, their struggles and small triumphs. "And what about you?" he asked after she'd told him about winning her first shooting contest at 16. "What are your dreams, Marlene Sinclair?" The question caught her off guard. Few people ever asked what she wanted. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "Something more than this, I suppose. I love my father, and Durango has been good to us in many ways, but sometimes I feel trapped, like there's a whole world out there I'll never see." "Why not see it then? It's not that simple. My father needs me, and a woman traveling alone in this country would face considerable challenges," Owen finished for her. "Though I suspect if anyone could overcome them, it would be you." Marlene felt a flush of pleasure at his words. "Perhaps someday. For now, I'm trying to save enough money to buy us a better place. Something with actual glass windows and a proper roof that doesn't leak when it rains." Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. Modest dreams are often the most important ones. As the evening progressed, Marlene found herself increasingly drawn to this thoughtful, articulate man. There was none of the aggressive posturing she'd come to expect from the men of Durango. No attempt to impress her with exaggerated tales of bravery or riches just around the corner. When they finally left the restaurant, the night air had turned cool. Owen offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. "May I walk you home?" he asked. "It's a fair distance to the edge of town," she warned. "All the better. Gives me more time in your company." They walked slowly through the darkened streets of Durango, their conversation now punctuated by comfortable silences. As they passed the saloon, raucous laughter and piano music spilled into the street, along with three men who stumbled out the batwing doors. "Well, look what we got here," slurred one of them, blocking their path. "The wild Sinclair girl and some fancy gentlemen." Marlene recognized him as one of the miners who'd lost the shooting competition. "Move aside, Parker. We're just passing through." "Not so fast," Parker said, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. "Been wanting to congratulate you on your win. Some of us think there might have been some cheating involved." "That's enough," Owen said quietly, his posture shifting subtly. "The lady won fair and square. Now step aside." Parker's two companions moved to flank them. "Or what, stranger? You gonna take on all three of us?" Marlene felt Owen's arm tense beneath her hand, but his voice remained steady. "I'd rather not, but I will if necessary." "Stop it, all of you," Marlene interjected. "This is foolish." "Parker, go sleep it off." "Always did think you were too good for the rest of us," Parker spat. "Turning down honest proposals from working men, acting like you're some kind of lady instead of just a wild." He never finished the sentence. Owen's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling backward into the dirt. The other two men rushed forward, but Owen was ready. He sidestepped the first, using the man's momentum to send him tumbling, then blocked a wild punch from the second and countered with a sharp jab to the solar plexus that left the miner gasping for air. Parker staggered to his feet, reaching for something at his belt. Marlene saw the glint of a knife. "Owen," she warned, reaching for the small derringer she kept in her pocket, but Owen had already seen it. He caught Parker's wrist mid-thrust, twisted hard enough to make the miner howl, and delivered another punch that put the man down for good this time. The entire confrontation had lasted less than a minute. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, turning to Marlene with concern in his eyes. She nodded, too stunned to speak. No one had ever fought for her honor before. Most men in town thought she deserved whatever crude comments came her way for being different. They hurried away from the scene, neither speaking until they were well clear of town. "I apologize for that," Owen finally said. "I shouldn't have lost my temper." "Don't apologize," Marlene replied. "He deserved it. I'm just not used to anyone standing up for me that way. Really, no one. My father would if he could, but his health." She trailed off. "And most men around here either want to court me as some kind of trophy or avoid me entirely." Owen was quiet for a moment. "People fear what they don't understand. And a woman like you, independent, skilled, unafraid to be herself, that frightens a lot of men." "Is that why you missed that last shot yesterday?" Marlene asked suddenly. "Because you're not frightened of a woman who can outshoot you?" In the moonlight she saw his smile. "I missed that shot because you deserved to win. Your aim was truer than mine all day. But no, I'm not frightened by your abilities. I admire them." They had reached her cabin now, a humble structure with a small porch where a lantern still burned, her father no doubt waiting up for her. "Thank you for dinner," Marlene said, suddenly shy. "And for the walk home." "It was my pleasure," Owen replied. "Though I leave for my uncle's ranch the day after tomorrow. Disappointment washed through her stronger than she'd expected. "Oh, well, I wish you luck there." "I was hoping," Owen said, his voice hesitant for the first time that evening, "that I might call on you again tomorrow. Perhaps you could show me that shooting skill of yours up close. I might learn something." Marlene smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "I'd like that. Meet me here at noon." "I'll be here," Owen promised. Then, with a gentleness that took her breath away, he took her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "Good night, Marlene Sinclair. Good night, Owen Ellis." She watched him walk away, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it, wondering what it was about this man that made her feel both stronger and more vulnerable than she'd ever been. Inside, her father looked up from his chair by the fire, a knowing smile on his face. "Have a nice evening." "Yes," Marlene admitted, unable to keep the smile from her own lips. "I did." "He seems like a good man," Thomas observed. "Saw how he handled those troublemakers in town. Word travels fast." "He's leaving for his uncle's ranch soon," Marlene said, trying to sound casual as she hung up her shawl. "It doesn't matter." Thomas watched his daughter's face carefully. "Sometimes, girl, the things that don't matter are the ones that matter most." The next day dawned bright and clear. Marlene rose early, finishing her chores in record time and even taking extra care with her appearance, though she told herself it was foolish to fuss over a simple shooting lesson. At precisely noon, hoofbeats announced Owen's arrival. He rode a handsome chestnut gelding, leading a second horse, a pretty gray mare. "Thought we might ride out to find a good spot for target practice," he explained, dismounting with easy grace. "Borrowed this one from the livery for you." Marlene patted the mare's neck. "She's lovely." "Let me get my rifle." They rode north out of town, following a stream that wound through pine-covered hills. The day was perfect for riding, not too hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed earth. "There's a meadow up ahead," Marlene said, guiding her horse alongside Owen's. "Good open space for shooting." The meadow was a small natural clearing surrounded by aspen trees just beginning to show hints of gold among their green leaves. They dismounted, tethering the horses to a low branch where they could graze on the lush grass. Owen set up makeshift targets, tin cans and bottles he'd brought in his saddlebags, while Marlene checked her Winchester. "Show me that stance of yours," Owen requested when everything was ready. "Your balance is different from most marksmen I've seen." Marlene demonstrated, explaining how she'd modified the traditional stance to compensate for her smaller frame. "See, most men shoot like this," she said, positioning herself in the standard way. "But I found if I shift my weight here and angle my shoulders slightly, I get better stability." Owen tried it, nodding appreciatively. "You're right. It does make a difference." They took turns shooting, exchanging tips and techniques. Owen was an excellent marksman, as she'd already known, but was genuinely interested in her methods. There was no male ego on display, no need to prove himself better. Just mutual respect between two skilled individuals. As the afternoon wore on, their conversation drifted to more personal topics. "Tell me about your mother," Owen said as they sat beneath an aspen tree, sharing the lunch he'd packed. Marlene touched the locket at her throat. "She was beautiful and strong. She left a comfortable life back east to follow my father west. Never complained even when times were hard. She taught me to read, to sew, to shoot, much to my father's amusement. She sounds remarkable." She was. The fever took her so quickly. 3 days from first symptoms to... Marlene swallowed hard. "My father was never the same after, and then the mining accident 2 years ago damaged his lungs. The doctor says he won't last another winter if we can't get him somewhere with a milder climate." Owen's eyes were sympathetic. "Is that possible?" With the prize money, maybe. There's a small place outside Santa Fe that might suit. But we'd have to sell our cabin here, and property in Durango isn't worth much yet. They were quiet for a moment, the only sounds the rustling leaves and distant call of a hawk. "What about you?" Marlene asked finally. "You mentioned your father, but what about your mother?" "Still alive, thankfully. Remarried to a good man, a shopkeeper in Austin. They have a comfortable life. She writes me regularly, always asking when I'll settle down." "And what do you tell her?" Owen smiled. "That I'll settle when I find something or someone worth settling for." Their eyes met, and Marlene felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. In just 2 days, this man had come to mean something to her, something she wasn't quite ready to name. "We should head back," she said, breaking the moment. "It'll be getting dark soon." They packed up their things and rode back toward town, the conversation easier now, punctuated by laughter and casual touches, his hand helping her down from the horse, her fingers brushing his as she returned a borrowed handkerchief. At her cabin, they lingered, neither wanting the day to end. "I leave tomorrow," Owen said, his voice tinged with regret. "I know. My uncle's ranch is only 20 miles north, not so far." Marlene nodded, looking down at her hands. "Will you? That is, would you want to write? I could send letters through Mr. Jenkins at the store. He makes deliveries that way sometimes." Owen's face brightened. "I'd like that very much." A moment of silence stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. "Marlene," Owen began, then hesitated. "I know we've only just met, but I feel." The cabin door opened and Thomas Sinclair stepped out, leaning heavily on his cane. "Evening, you two. Thought I heard voices out here." "Good evening, Mr. Sinclair," Owen greeted him, tipping his hat respectfully. "Won't you come in for some coffee before you go?" Thomas offered. "Just brewed a fresh pot." Owen glanced at Marlene, who nodded. "I'd be honored, sir." Inside the humble cabin, they sat around the small table, drinking coffee and talking easily. Thomas shared stories of his early days in Colorado Territory, before the big mining operations moved in. Owen spoke of his travels, adventures and mishaps that had them all laughing. Marlene watched the two men, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. Owen fit here in their simple home as if he'd always belonged. When it was finally time for him to leave, Thomas excused himself tactfully, claiming fatigue. At the door, Owen took both of Marlene's hands in his. "I meant what I was going to say earlier. I know it's fast, probably too fast, but there's something between us, Marlene, something I've never felt before." "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "I'll write as soon as I'm settled at my uncle's, and I'll come back to visit as often as I can. I'd like that." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. But Marlene closed the distance herself, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was gentle yet full of promise. When they parted, Owen's eyes were bright with emotion. "Good night, Marlene Sinclair." "Good night, Owen Ellis." She watched him ride away until he was just a silhouette against the darkening sky, her heart both lighter and heavier than it had been in years. The next morning, Owen departed for his uncle's ranch. Marlene threw herself into her work at the general store, trying not to count the days until his first letter might arrive. 2 weeks passed, then 3, a month. No word came. "Men make promises they don't intend to keep," Mrs. Peterson remarked one day as Marlene measured fabric for her. "Especially to girls who don't know their proper place." Marlene said nothing, but the words stung more than she cared to admit. Had she been a fool to believe Owen was different, to think that someone like him could truly care for someone like her? 6 weeks after Owen's departure, disaster struck. Marlene returned home from work to find her father collapsed on the cabin floor, his breathing shallow, lips tinged blue. "Pa," she cried, rushing to his side. Pa, can you hear me? Thomas's eyes fluttered open, recognition dawning through the pain. Marlene, he wheezed. Can't breathe right. She helped him to his bed, then ran for the doctor, fear clutching at her heart. Dr. Wilson came quickly, but his diagnosis was grim. His lungs are failing, Marlene, the doctor said privately after examining Thomas. The damage from the mine collapse was worse than we thought. I can give him something for the pain, but what? He needs to get out of this altitude. Immediately, somewhere warm and dry. Arizona Territory, perhaps, or New Mexico, as you discussed. It's his only chance. Marlene nodded, determination replacing fear. We'll leave as soon as he's stable enough to travel. That night, she counted the prize money again, adding the small savings she'd put aside from her work at the store. It would be enough to get them to Santa Fe, perhaps enough to rent a small place for a few months while she found work. It would have to do. 3 days later, Thomas was strong enough to sit up and take some broth. Marlene had arranged everything, sold what furniture they couldn't take, hired a wagon and driver to take them south, given notice at the general store. You're giving up a lot, Thomas said weakly as he watched her pack their remaining belongings. Not giving up, Marlene corrected. Moving forward, to get you well. And what about young Ellis? Have you written to tell him we're leaving? Marlene's hand stilled on the shirt she was folding. No. There's been no word from him, Pa, not a single letter, Thomas frowned. That doesn't seem right. He struck me as a man of his word. Well, he wouldn't be the first to change his mind about a woman like me, Marlene said, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. They say I'm too wild to love, remember? Nonsense, her father protested. You're strong, independent. Any man worth his salt would see that as a virtue, not a flaw. Marlene smiled sadly. For a moment she'd thought Owen Ellis was that man. Now she knew better. They were scheduled to leave the following morning. Marlene spent her last evening in Durango making sure everything was in order, checking and rechecking their preparations. As twilight fell, she stepped outside for a final look at the mountains that had been her home for the past 3 years. The sound of an approaching horse made her turn. A rider was coming up the path to their cabin, moving fast. Her heart leapt before she could stop it, but she tamped down the foolish hope. It was probably just the wagon driver, coming to confirm their departure time. But as the rider drew closer, the last rays of sunlight revealed a familiar chestnut gelding, and atop it, a man whose silhouette she would know anywhere. Owen Ellis dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his face etched with concern. Marlene, thank God you're still here. She stood frozen, emotions warring within her, joy at seeing him, anger at his long silence, confusion at his sudden appearance. What are you doing here? She managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. I came as soon as I got your letter about leaving, Owen said, approaching her with long strides. Rode straight through, barely stopped to rest the horse. My letter, Marlene shook her head. I didn't send you a letter. Owen's brow furrowed. But the boy who delivered it said it came from you, telling me you were leaving for Santa Fe tomorrow because your father's health had worsened. I never sent any message, Marlene said slowly. Though it's true we're leaving tomorrow. How did you know where to find us? I never told you the location of my uncle's ranch, Mr. Jenkins at the store. I've written to you 5 times through him, Marlene. He said he delivered the letters. Understanding dawned along with a fresh wave of hurt. I never received a single one. Owen's expression hardened. Someone's been intercepting our letters. But who would? Marlene stopped, realization hitting her. Mrs. Peterson. She works with Mr. Jenkins sometimes when he's short-handed, and she's never approved of me. It doesn't matter now, Owen said, taking her hands in his. What matters is I'm here and you were leaving without saying goodbye. I thought you'd forgotten about me, Marlene admitted, the hurt of the past weeks evident in her voice. That all your promises were just words. Never, Owen said fiercely. I meant every word, Marlene, every promise. I've spent these weeks working from dawn until dusk to make my uncle's north pasture habitable, to build a proper cabin there, for us. Marlene's heart stuttered. For us, if you'll have me. Owen's eyes were earnest, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. I know it's fast, and maybe I'm a fool for feeling so much so quickly, but I can't bear the thought of you leaving, of never seeing you again. My father needs to go south, Marlene said, though everything in her wanted to say yes immediately. The doctor says it's his only chance. Then I'll go with you, Owen said without hesitation. My uncle will understand. I can find work in Santa Fe or anywhere else you need to be. Marlene stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You would leave everything you've worked for me. For you, Owen confirmed, his voice soft but certain. Because I love you, Marlene Sinclair. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you in that general store, so confident and capable and beautiful. And every moment since has only confirmed what I already knew. Tears welled in Marlene's eyes, but for once she didn't try to hide them. No one's ever loved me for being who I am. They always want me to be something else, something tamer. Owen smiled, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. They say you're too wild to love. Marlene nodded, her throat tight with emotion. That's what they say. Well, Owen said, his smile broadening as he drew her closer, I like wild things. And then he was kissing her, and Marlene was kissing him back, pouring 6 weeks of longing and uncertainty and newfound hope into the embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. So will you have me, Marlene Sinclair? Will you let me come with you to Santa Fe, and when your father is well, will you marry me? Yes, Marlene whispered, her heart so full it might burst. Yes to all of it. The sound of the cabin door opening made them turn. Thomas stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane but smiling broadly. Heard voices, he explained. Figured it might be important enough to get out of bed for. Owen approached him respectfully. Mr. Sinclair, I've asked your daughter to marry me, with your blessing, sir. Thomas looked between them, his weathered face soft with affection. Do you love her? Not despite her wild spirit, but because of it? I do, Owen said without hesitation. I love everything about her, especially her wildness. Thomas nodded, satisfied. Then you have my blessing, and my thanks for making an old man very happy before his time comes. Your time isn't coming any time soon, Pa, Marlene insisted, moving to his side to support him. We're going to get you well in Santa Fe. Santa Fe, Thomas mused. Always wanted to see it, and now I'll have both of you to help me get there. The journey to Santa Fe was long and arduous, but with Owen's help, they made it safely. They found a small adobe house on the outskirts of town, where the dry air and lower altitude immediately improved Thomas's breathing. Owen found work with a local rancher, while Marlene took in sewing and gave shooting lessons to wealthy Eastern tourists fascinated by the idea of learning from a real Western girl. By the following spring, Thomas's health had improved enough that he could sit outside for hours, enjoying the New Mexico sunshine. On a perfect May morning, with the scent of desert wildflowers in the air, Marlene Sinclair became Marlene Ellis, in a small ceremony attended by her father and a few new friends they'd made in Santa Fe. Never thought I'd see the day, Thomas said at the modest celebration afterward, his eyes moist with happy tears. My wild girl, a married woman. Still wild, Pa, Marlene corrected, glancing at Owen with a smile. Just found someone who appreciates it. That I do, Owen agreed, taking his new wife's hand. And I always will. That night, after Thomas had retired and they were finally alone in the small room Owen had added to the adobe house. Marlene stood by the window, looking out at the stars scattered like diamonds across the vast New Mexico sky. Having second thoughts? Owen asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. Not one, she replied, leaning back against his chest. Just thinking how different my life is now from what I expected. A year ago, I never would have imagined leaving Colorado, being married, being happy. And are you? Happy? Marlene turned in his arms to face him. Happier than I ever thought possible. You've never once tried to change me, Owen, never asked me to be less than I am. Why would I? He asked, genuine puzzlement in his voice. Your strength, your spirit, your wildness, those are the things I love most about you. Marlene reached up to touch his face, marveling at the miracle of this man who loved her exactly as she was. And I love you for loving those things about me. Owen smiled, that same smile that had first caught her attention in the general store all those months ago. Well then, Mrs. Ellis, it seems we're perfectly matched. Indeed it does, Mr. Ellis, Marlene agreed, rising on tiptoes to kiss her husband. Indeed it does. 5 years later, Marlene stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Owen taught their 3-year-old son, Thomas, to ride his first pony. The little boy's laughter carried across the New Mexico landscape, mingling with the sounds of cattle in the distance and the windmill creaking gently in the summer breeze. Their ranch, modest but prosperous, lay halfway between Santa Fe and Albuquerque. After Thomas Sinclair had passed peacefully 2 years earlier, they had used the money he'd left them carefully saved from his daughter's earnings to purchase this land and build a new life. Marlene's hand rested on the slight swell of her belly, where their second child grew. The doctor had confirmed just last week what she'd already suspected. Another little Ellis would join their family by winter. As Owen lifted Thomas from the pony and set him on his shoulders, Marlene felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was happiness, not the tame, confined life she'd once feared marriage would bring, but something wild and free and ever-changing, like the western landscape she loved. Owen looked up, catching her eye across the yard, and smiled that smile that still made her heart skip a beat. He said something to Thomas, then set the boy down and watched as he ran toward Marlene, little legs pumping with excitement. "Mama, I rode by myself," Thomas exclaimed, colliding with her skirts. "I saw, sweetheart," Marlene said, bending to hug him. "You're very brave, just like your papa." "And wild like my mama," the boy added, repeating what he'd obviously heard before. Marlene laughed, ruffling his auburn hair so like her own. "That's right, wild like your mama." Owen joined them, placing an arm around his wife's shoulders. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly, his eyes dropping to where her hand still rested on her stomach. "Perfect," Marlene assured him. "Just thinking about how fortunate we are." Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. They had built something special here, a marriage of equals, a family that valued strength and independence as much as love and tenderness, a life that embraced the wildness in both of them. "Come on, son," Owen said to Thomas. "Time to help me check the fence line before dinner." "Can I ride my pony?" the boy asked eagerly. Owen glanced at Marlene, who nodded her approval. "Yes, but you stay right beside me, understand?" Thomas nodded solemnly, then broke into a wide grin that was pure Ellis charm. "Yes, sir." As Owen turned to go, Marlene caught his hand. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too, wild thing," he replied with a wink, using the endearment that had become his special name for her over the years. Marlene watched them go, her husband and son, the two great loves of her life, soon to be joined by a third, and thought about the long, winding trail that had led her here. From the lonely, misunderstood girl in Durango to the woman she was now. Wife, mother, rancher. Still the best shot in the territory when she cared to prove it. The sun was setting over the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A perfect New Mexico evening, the kind that made her grateful for every twist of fate that had brought her to this place, this life, this love. Marlene Ellis took a deep breath of the sage-scented air and smiled to herself. Some might still call her too wild, too independent, too much. But she had found the one man who never wanted her to be anything less. As Owen had said that night outside her cabin in Durango, when the course of her life had changed forever, he liked wild things. And in loving her wildness, he had helped her find a freedom greater than any she could have imagined on her own, the freedom to be exactly who she was, and to be loved completely for it. That, Marlene thought as she turned to prepare dinner for her family, was the greatest adventure of all.